Welcome everyone to another episode of World Gone Weird. Buckle up because the news cycle is just relentless.
Relentless is an understatement. It's like the universe is throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And most of it's definitely sticking, unfortunately.
Well, statistically speaking, the more events that occur, the higher the probability of unusual and concerning events emerging. It's entropy at work.
Yeah, but is it really that random? I mean, are we just seeing chaos, or is there some kind of agenda driving all this craziness?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are we witnessing a series of unfortunate coincidences, or is there something more sinister at play? Today, we're diving into a few stories that made me raise an eyebrow, and maybe you too.
My eyebrows have permanently relocated to my hairline at this point. So, what's on the menu of weirdness today?
Okay, first up, the situation in Turkey. Protests erupting against Erdogan, the mayor of Istanbul, arrested. Over 1,000 people detained, including journalists. It feels like a page ripped straight out of a dystopian novel.
The economic pressures being cited by protesters are scientifically relevant. It raises questions about quantifiable economic indicators and their correlation to social unrest. It would be useful to analyze the specific indicators driving these protests from a data-driven perspective.
See, this is what I'm talking about. You've got Erdogan claiming the judiciary is independent, but then you have mass arrests of political opponents and journalists. Smells fishy, right? Is this about actual corruption, or is Erdogan just consolidating power?
Consolidating power is Erdogan's favorite hobby. It's his version of collecting stamps, except instead of stamps, he collects political prisoners. It's very efficient.
Okay, biting humor aside, this is concerning. The EU is already raising concerns about the erosion of democracy in Turkey. It's a country that's been trying to join the EU for decades. This surely doesn't help matters.
Well, statistically, crackdowns on dissent tend to correlate negatively with international acceptance and cooperation. It's an easy observation, but it's one to note.
And the US is just calling it an internal legal matter for Turkey, which basically means they're not going to do anything great.
That's not the most reassuring response, no. It highlights the tricky balance between respecting national sovereignty and upholding human rights and democratic values.
Yeah, sovereignty until someone starts tear gassing journalists. Then it's a free-for-all. I'm kidding, of course. Mostly.
Speaking of legal matters, let's move on to this story about the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act for deportations. Apparently, a judge is arguing that even Nazis got more due process than these deportees are getting.
Wait, seriously? The Alien Enemies Act? That's a wartime law. Why are we using a wartime law to deport people who haven't even been convicted of anything?
The question of whether historical precedents can be applied in the modern context is relevant here. The judge's comments raise questions about arbitrary application of wartime laws during political tension. If Nazis get this, why not current criminals?
Because if you're actually being reasonable, the entire point is to follow the legal guidelines. This is the equivalent of saying, well, why do I have to stop at this stop sign? Well, because it's there.
Exactly. It raises a flag. It's about the principle of due process, about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their background, has the right to a fair hearing.
But are these people actually innocent? I mean, they're suspected of being gang members, right? Is it not right to make sure people are not gang members?
Even suspected gang members are entitled to basic rights and due process under established legal frameworks. The claims of gang membership must be evaluated with credible evidence.
Okay, so even if they are deporting gang members, is this really the best way? Is there not an actual process in place already to do this? Or are they trying to pull a fast one with a rarely used wartime law? Plus, there's already enough deportations. Do we need to be faster?
And there are potential implications for international relations. The U.S. is relying on agreements with countries like El Salvador to take in these deportees. If those countries feel pressured or exploited, it could backfire.
How might this policy impact broader political relations? And how would that affect international interactions? It's a complex web of interconnected factors.
Moving on, there's this story about Point Roberts, Washington. It's a U.S. exclave that's completely dependent on Canada. Trump's trade war with Canada is basically strangling the town.
Oh yeah, I saw that. It's like a real-life example of how trade wars hurt ordinary people. This town's economy depends on the goodwill between the U.S. and Canada, and Trump's tariffs are just destroying that.
Point Roberts, where the only way to get to the US mainland is through Canada. They're like that one kid in school who always got stuck in the middle of every argument. abhor them. Hopefully it ends soon.
I wonder what can be said here. How do seemingly abstract, macro-level trade policies translate into tangible economic hardship for local businesses and residents? Quantifying these dynamics using economic indicators is crucial.
And it highlights the importance of international cooperation and diplomacy. When countries start throwing up trade barriers, it's the little guys who suffer.
So, do you think this is just collateral damage, or is Trump deliberately targeting Canada? I know he has a thing against free trade, but this seems almost petty.
It's definitely petty. He probably forgot Point Roberts even existed. He probably saw a map and thought, wait, that little nub is still part of the US. Put a tariff on it.
Well, whatever the motivation, it's a stark reminder that political decisions have real-world consequences. These aren't just abstract concepts. They're impacting people's lives, their livelihoods, their communities.
The interconnectedness is clear here, but it's not that complex to realize.
Okay, one last story before we move on to our main topic. Trump is reportedly considering gutting the Department of Education and pushing more school choice programs. This is creating a rift among Republicans, apparently.
Finally, something that is actually a debate. I mean, school choice sounds good in theory, but what about the public schools? Are we just going to let them crumble while we funnel money to private institutions?
Private schools are better? Tell that to the rich kids who peaked in high school and now work for their dad. What exactly are we trying to teach people with this move? Exactly.
I am not certain this is something that can be approached with science. It's an ongoing debate. A truly data-driven approach would require a detailed examination of outcomes, controlling for socioeconomic factors.
That's the key. What policies would support a more equitable and comprehensive educational system that meets the needs of all children, regardless of their background?
Exactly. It's not just about throwing money at private schools. It's about investing in our public schools, supporting teachers, and ensuring that every kid has access to a quality education.
I mean, the schools are already terrible. It has to do with the government cutting corners and not caring about schools. So, school choice is basically just a way of privatizing and ultimately making education more unequal.
Okay, so we've covered Turkey, the Alien Enemies Act, Point Roberts, and school choice. All pretty heavy stuff. But let's shift gears and get to the main topic for today: the unintended consequences of global extreme personalized biofeedback techniques.
Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Are we talking about mind control and super soldiers?
I suppose the essence is about exploring how the pursuit of optimal mental and physical performance through technology is impacting social interaction and potentially leading to conflict over resources or access to advanced tech.
Exactly. Think about it. We're already seeing the rise of personalized medicine, genetic testing, and brain-computer interfaces. What happens when these technologies become even more advanced, more accessible, and more extreme?
More extreme? Like what? We're going to have people hacking their own brains to become super geniuses, turning themselves into emotionless automatons.
Finally, we're becoming robots. What's the issue? Progress is progress, right?
The potential for cognitive biases and decision-making errors must be considered. The possibility of such a future warrants a thorough investigation from an objective standpoint.
And that's what is exciting about this topic. It's the potential for inequality. If these technologies are expensive and only accessible to the wealthy, it could create a new form of social stratification where the rich literally have a cognitive and physical advantage over the poor.
So, the rich get richer and the smart get smarter? Sounds about right.
And the rest of us are stuck eating Tide Pods. I'll start practicing now.
I mean, imagine a world where access to these biofeedback technologies becomes a source of conflict. Countries compete for resources to develop them, individuals fight for access, and social divisions deepen.
That is indeed a good point. Resource scarcity, economic disparities, and misinformation all play a role and would also need to be investigated to further validate such a claim.
Okay, so say this happens. What does that even look like? Are we talking about governments battling over brain-enhancing drugs? Companies fighting over access to genetic modification technology?
Potentially, yes, but it could also be more subtle. Think about the impact on education. If some kids have access to brain-boosting technologies and others don't, it could create a huge achievement gap.
Achievement gap? Please, the achievement gap already requires a GPS to navigate. At this point, all schools should have AI assistants, and I mean like yesterday.
Exactly. This brings into question some ethical questions.
Okay, so what if we could regulate these technologies? Make them accessible to everyone? Would that solve the problem?
That's the ideal, but it's also incredibly difficult. Who gets to decide what's ethical use of these technologies? Who enforces those regulations? What about the black market?
A black market brain? Sounds like a party. Sign me up. I'll make sure to come back with a few new upgrades.
That is a good point. There's a lot there that needs to be solved for.
But it's not just about the potential for conflict. It's also about the impact on social interaction. If we're all constantly trying to optimize ourselves, what happens to empathy, compassion, and human connection?
Are you saying we're going to become a bunch of hyper-rational, emotionless robots? I mean, some people already are.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Finally, a world without feelings. Everyone complains about feelings, but what are we supposed to do with them? This move is progress.
Perhaps it may not be in humanity's interest. Social interaction may be limited.
I mean, what happens to our ability to connect with each other on a human level? Will we become so focused on self-improvement that we lose sight of the importance of community and collaboration?
So, it could become a trade-off. We gain more knowledge, but lose emotion. It depends on whether we're okay with that.
We're already so disconnected now. I mean, I sit around with people, but half the time they are on their phones. We haven't been connected in a long time.
Right. It's the irony of technology, right? It promises to connect us, but it can also isolate us. The question is, how do we harness the potential benefits of these biofeedback technologies while mitigating the risks?
Maybe we need a global summit on ethical biofeedback. You know, like the UN, but for brain hacking.
I am not sure this can be solved by a meeting. Sounds like the worst idea imaginable. You want the people destroying the world to fix the world?
Collaboration is needed, but that is a fair point.
But I agree, it has to be a global conversation involving scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public. We need to think about the long-term implications of these technologies and develop guidelines for their responsible use.
So, what do we do in the meantime? Just sit back and wait for the brain hacking revolution to begin.
That actually sounds like the plan at this point.
No. We need to start thinking critically about these issues now. We need to educate ourselves, engage in public discourse, and demand transparency from the companies and governments developing these technologies.
Okay, but what if it's too late? What if the genie is already out of the bottle?
Perhaps a better answer would be looking at it pragmatically. The key would be a holistic approach involving transparency, investigation, and global cooperation to develop responsible innovation.
It might be, but that doesn't mean we should give up. We have a responsibility to shape the future we want to live in, and that starts with asking the tough questions and demanding answers.
Sounds like a plan, and I'll be there front row, sipping on a martini, as usual. Thanks for the crazy ride as always, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Stay weird, stay informed, and stay critical. We'll catch you next time on World Gone Weird.